Well, good morning, everybody. The theme for many of our forecast videos over the last several weeks has been about the development of drought that's been in the Mid-South, parts of the Ohio River Valley, especially getting over into parts of Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, drought in the Northeast, drought along the coast of the Carolinas into Georgia, down to Mississippi and Alabama as well. And we've covered all summer the dryness that's been throughout the West with the very late monsoon and very I guess localized the way the monsoon was with where it delivered its heavy rainfall. We've seen in a few places, if you come over here and just click on this, you can be taken to all of the maps that are on the Drought Monitor website. We can just come over to the change maps. I like these a lot. And I just want to show you something. If we come down here to let's do an 8-week or a 2-month Drought Monitor class change map. I just want to make a point that there are places in the Mid-South and getting over to West Virginia and Ohio and then also in the Northeast that have had a 4-class degradation. And this has been the theme, right? It's just been talking about these areas that have been missed by moisture as the Bermuda high has left. That's been a big part of what I've been discussing. We watched the Mississippi River fall. It's almost 6 feet below low stage this morning. And the question is, when are we going to see some sort of meaningful return of moisture? So the last 7 days have looked like this. We've had most of our storms running north-south here in the plains. And yeah, it's been very wet in pockets of the plains here. And there's been more storms that have kind of covered an arc stretching from parts of Oregon through Idaho, getting into Montana. And then again here along the front range of the Rockies. This is the remnants of the moisture from what was once Tropical Storm Mario. We'll talk more about that in a second. But there's a lot of zeros on this map. And as I mentioned, the would-be tropical hybrid low that moved up the coast did not deliver the rainfall into North Carolina as anticipated, put more of it here into Virginia and Maryland and Delaware overall. Let's keep going back in time, though. This is the last 14 days. All right, just have a good look at this map. Let's go back even further. This is 30 days, and now you can really see those drought areas showing up. So I'm looking here, pockets of the Red River Valley, this large area of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, Eastern Great Lakes, Northeast. And again, that spot right in through there needs to be watched carefully. This might be the last spot to fill in with good moisture. I did want to pull up some data, though, from right down here where, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri all meet, and just show you something. So I picked out a town, Parma, where it is trying hard to rain just there. That's where the crosshair is this morning. But I was looking down here, and it had been 36 days since that spot has received more than a tenth of an inch of total precipitation. But as we know, they've flatlined. I mean, just go have a look at the data. There it is. They're way above average on the year, but that is where the drought came in. All the flooding was back in April and in May. And you can just, what a flip-flop in the pattern overall. But here's the precip forecast. I mean, there are some of the models that are in that area putting down 3 to 4 inches of rain in the next 7 to 15 days. And it's pretty consistent with when it's coming through. All of the models are trying to lay down this rainfall as we get into this weekend and start through early next week. So that spot again is here. And I just wanted to point out these longer term drought areas. And it's not just this one. I mean, we've got lots of this going throughout parts of the East as we go forward. But there it is. There's your forecast. And we talked all week. In fact, we started this conversation last week about this possibility of a low cutting itself off in this area, reviving precipitation. Now, I was very cautious on the precipitation totals, right? I said, hey, listen, we get into drought times like this, and you see the models trying to toss out these huge numbers. We always have to just take a step back and say, is it really possible to see that kind of moisture come in, or should we cut the numbers in half? And there are significant chances of bringing in two inches of rain into this area, maybe parts of Missouri, Kansas, northern parts of Arkansas, and maybe this corner of Illinois grabbing over 3 inches of rain. But take note, that region continues to stay dry in the forecast for the next 7 days. And that's not to ignore other spots, but these are areas we've been concentrating on for drought. But the probabilities here, I mean, that's the chance of grabbing an inch in the next 10 days, and it is very high through that corridor we just discussed. Now, what I'll be watching carefully is how much of this moisture does get over to those dry spots, not only here in the Carolinas up toward the Mid-Atlantic, but in the Northeast as well. And do we start to see some sort of concerning trend across the rest of the country? Where we see white on this is where we're not expecting to see a lot of heavy rainfall. Now, this spot right here has got me very intrigued. So I went and I pulled up Merced, which is in California. And this is the remnants. You can see the rain running around Merced, County Merced, California. But it was interesting to note that it had been 170 days since they had measured more than 1/10 of an inch. And if you want to see their precipitation graph, look at this. I just flatlined here for this whole. But this is common that these kind of things happen. And they've had these little events, but they're not more than more than 1/100 of an inch, which is what I set the criteria at. So I just want to make a point here as we kind of look around the country and see what's going on, because that area, if you come back to the current, they're actually under flood watch right now. And that is because we're seeing the remnants of Mario come through this area, bringing in some precipitation. Now, the satellite data yesterday did show this. We had isolated storms that were across the south. Okay, we had much more organized convection here. Some of this produced some very strong winds. We had a tornado that was up in this corner of North Dakota last night or yesterday afternoon. That stormed right in through there. And in the northwest, once again, we were watching quite a bit of wildfire smoke, parts of it in the Willamette Valley, some of it spreading over the Columbia Basin. But this broad cloud shield, that is what is left of Mario. All right, let's get back to kind of this bigger theme of where this is all going. How did we get all of this moisture just in the last 3 days here, when all I've been talking about is the Bermuda high being gone? Okay, so I just want to make a point here. The Bermuda high is the primary source. Okay, if it's sitting over Bermuda, which is right there, it's the primary source to drive moisture directly out of the Gulf North, right? So I focus on it a lot. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains, that is a main focal point of moisture delivery. So we talk about it quite a bit. How did we get it? How did we get the rain in this area? I mean, you saw some of these maps, like that's the last 14 days. Where did this come from? Well, if you look at the way the flow has been set up, all right, we've had the Bermuda high way over here, okay? And there's been higher pressure sitting in this area. There's been coastal lows that have lived off the North Carolina coast, but there's still flow doing this. There's still moisture getting pulled, but it's having to go through Mexico and Texas before it makes its way to the north. And as we've been discussing, it's been all meridional, north-south. So they've had repeated chances of getting what I would call limited moisture. But if you have limited moisture coming up day after day after day, and you're lifting it, condensing it, making clouds, it's going to rain here. And we were able to do that. But this region's sitting in this kind of reflective high in the absence of the Bermuda high, which is way over here, normally pumping moisture in. That's your area that went dry. So let's play forward and just see how this all shakes down. We know that our next tropical system, named Gabrielle, is going to stay out to open ocean. There's Gabrielle. But we just play it out here and see there are, I mean, look at this. There's low pressure centers that are just driving their way into the Mid-South and starting to just bring up the chances of rainfall. And it's how long they linger that ultimately determines how much of this moisture they spiral into the low, and we get to use it for rainfall. So the main culprit driving all of this is lingering just here in the Gulf of Alaska. So this is the one we're going to be watching. Now there's a coastal low I'm going to keep an eye on for California. This is the low that yesterday moved through. It's cut off as well, that moved through parts of the upper Midwest, driving the storms there. But this is the guy we're going to keep an eye on. The piece of this is probably going to break off and make its way and just sit and spin over the Midwest for quite some time. There's other things to be watching over here, all right? And we're going to come back to this in a few minutes, but there are a few tropical systems that I need to make note of as they're possibly going to influence the jet stream pattern. So I'll show you that again in a few seconds. But have a look at it. On the left, I have the GFS, and on the right, I have the European model. And what we're looking at is vorticity, or spin in the atmosphere. Now, there's your cutoff low from California, all right? This is the deeper trough that will cut itself off as it moves through and gets into the Midwest. And we do see here, by Sunday, a cutoff little feature that's sitting over the Dakotas, all right? Now, let's play this forward, getting past Sunday into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. There they are. Now, in the GFS, we've got 1 and 2. In the European, we've got 1 and 2. And as we watch these two features, the European is more aggressive on taking that second low and letting it cut off and linger. They're both pretty well timed on what's going on with the system in California. We'll take a look at the rainfall from that in a moment. But just take note of the positional differences if you're watching this and you're in California today. But what I see is by next Wednesday, that cutoff low, which will have rain ahead of it the entire time, tries to just sit and spin in the European model over Missouri. And what I want to do is figure out the differences, versus here and there with a more open wave. All right, what are the models suggesting? So let's see the total precip. European model first. Playing this out through this weekend. I'm going to stop this 7 a.m. on Monday. A lot of thunderstorm activity is going to be out ahead of this first one. That's the remnants of Mario. You see the deeper troughs driving initially the heaviest rains in British Columbia versus the rest of the Pacific Northwest. And anything that could be in the tropics, well, we'll talk more about this in a second, but I think most of the action is still going to be curling around the Bermuda High. That's by Monday. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, see this kind of filling in these extremely dry areas right in through here. And taking this out farther, I'm trying to see if the frontal boundaries make their way all the way into the southeast, up to the mid-Atlantic. And some of the models, as we get out there farther, like the European, is trying to make that happen. And at the same time, there seems to be something coming out of the Caribbean or the Bay of Campeche or the Gulf that we need to keep an eye on down here as well. But these rainfall totals they're impressive. And even if we only get half of this, which I think we'll get more than half, but even if we only get half of this, this is the beginning of a breakdown in the long-standing drought problem. Now, here's the overall issue with this. That cutoff load that's coming through here, it is how do I describe this? It is kind of a solitary feature. It's not a part of a bigger systematic shift just yet. We may have to wait till fall gets here for that. And by the way, the equinox is just a few days away from us now. But I need to keep comparing models here real quick. That's the 10-day, ECMWF. Here's the 10-day GFS. Let's just play this out there. This is all the way to Friday already. And let's just take it out to 10 days. So if I go back and forth, you can see the differences, right? You can clearly see that the European is the wetter model, in this region. But that is a region that needs moisture. You can also see the GFS is doing a whole lot more different things with the tropical systems coming out of the East Pacific, which is something we need to be looking at and talking about as well. So I'm going to show you this. This is a forecast of pressure, and what we're looking at here is the European ensemble. So look, it's trying to toss out a bunch of tropical lows here. But what I'm really keeping an eye on, all right, is that is the bigger low that we're keeping an eye on, the cutoff. That's going to be here middle of next week. And then I want to see if anything shows up down here. So let's keep playing this out. You see, some of the ensemble members are they're just attempting late in the time period to bring something out of the Caribbean. I need to keep an eye on it. There seems to be no guarantees with any of this, but it's something to be watching because every other system is curling around the Bermuda High, which is still way off the image here. So I don't have a lot of evidence in the next 7 to 10 days of something just screaming across and doing this. The birthplace may be south of that little arc I drew. So that's what we got going on in the tropics there. The East Pacific is a bit interesting. There are more tropical lows forming, and we've already seen 2 of them, the most recent, which was Mario, send the remnants of their moisture here. And we just need to see if that's going to happen with maybe some of the next tropical systems developing. But to be honest, I think the most focus I want to give on a few things are going to be these tropical systems in the Pacific. And these 2, okay, right here, I think these have more of a trajectory moving, toward mainland China. And they're powerful, especially this second one will likely get up to Cat 4. But that guy right there, Nyoguri, I'm not sure, I should have looked up how to pronounce it. That's one I'm curious about because some of the forecast members are taking what's left of this and shoving it into the North Pacific. And that's going to be key. Now, what it does 5 days from now, some of the models are taking it here, some of it are taking it there. If it makes this northward trend, that tends to be disruptive to the entire North Pacific jet stream pattern. So now we get into the meat of this pattern. Next 15 days, this is a key feature. Now, if this low was over the West Coast, then we'd be talking about a pattern break. I'm talking about major change because if that came here, guess what? Bermuda High would slide and we would open it up to extremely active, very early fall weather across everywhere inside that circle. And the West would go cold and we'll go cooler. And we'd see probably our first big snows in the Rockies and in the Cascades and maybe in the Sierra Nevada. But as it stands, it tends to want to live here. And I think it's largely due to this bigger ridge. There's your trough and then this. Look at that feature there. That's a sizable ridge. Now, Matt's been making a case, and I've been backing him up on this, but we have to watch to see if this region, starts to build any sort of cold air for the last 10 days of this month. All right, that's what we're going to keep an eye on. But if it doesn't, this ridge is going to dominate. So let's take this and try to make some sense out of it here. Near term, here is the forecast for the simulated radar. So this is all monsoonal. This is all remnants of Mario. And then this is the first of a sequence of lows, the bigger one, not even close yet, that we're watching on Friday spin up. So some of the first chances of rain that are moving farther to the east are coming in this Saturday. This is Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon and evening. And my hometown has their homecoming this weekend, so it'll be interesting to see if they do it on the football field. But we'll see if they have to move that indoors because of the rain that could be in this area. But this is it. So many of you going out for Friday night football tonight. Let's just have a look. This is 7-8 o'clock tonight. Just wanted to show you what was happening here. And then we've got our moisture that's back farther to the west and the isolated storms in the southeast. Okay, now let's go forward again to Saturday. This is Saturday midday, getting into Saturday evening. And there we go. That's the guy we're going to keep an eye on there. Okay, that's the one that midweek next week is going to be here. So with that look, okay, in the forecast models, I want to encourage you to go to agweather.com and click on the map section. I'm just going to scroll up real quick to share what it is. You're just clicking right here. And then slide down until you see my 5-panel model set up here. And you can pick and choose any model you want to have a closer look. But they all kind of say a similar thing as to what we just saw from when I did the European model analysis compared to the GFS. What we really want to know is how does it all shape up as we get out there farther? Because the forecast from the European ensemble for week 2, boy, it shows you what happens when you anchor a low here. See all the moisture going in that direction? If that low moves at all, this whole pattern changes. Better moisture comes into this region. So as it stands for the next 2 weeks, let's just take it back and show it to you. That's the next 7 days. And this would be out to day 10. This is week 2. And most of the models look something like this. You know why I'm watching this area. Okay, we're going to keep an eye on something coming out here. It just seems to be showing up in the models. But after this cutoff low goes through, until that deeper trough moves, we're probably going to see another kind of return of some drier conditions in through here. And once again, you can see the influence of the Bermuda high keeping any would-be tropical system out to open ocean. Now that forecast is being echoed by kind of all of the models, all right? And I'll just say this, the most aggressive on the week 2 precipitation is the CPC. Like, look, they're much wetter, I think, than everybody else is. But the AI model into week 2, it is really trying to brew something here out of the Gulf or out of the Bay of Campeche or out of the Caribbean. So we're just going to keep watching these features until we see something big happening there. Okay. Now remember, this is their forecast from yesterday. All of the models have updated this morning. They'll update their map, very soon. Speaking of the CPC, they were down all day yesterday, but their website is back up today, and I want to show you their new 1-month outlook for the month of September. So this is the month of October, and this is what they're looking at. Now they've got above average precip in the northwest, equal chances across a broad section of the U.S., but drier, here. And they've got some cooler air at times returning to the plains and Midwest, but overall they're keeping the greatest chances of being hotter than average in the southwest and southeast of the East Coast. Now, I can make a case for this, right? I mean, if we don't break that pattern we're in, this tends to work. And they're getting support from models, right? This is the new European extended forecast. So it's still very dry in this area for the month of October. But again, you've got to watch with me these 3 spots because we could blow this forecast out if we can get moisture to come out of the tropical regions of the Western Atlantic, getting into the Caribbean and Gulf. I think we need to keep an eye on that. I would say that the models lose signal in a big way for the West and for the upper Midwest, and plains going forward. I don't think they have it because we got such weak signals, and I think a disruptive typhoon could really come through and change the whole jet stream pattern across the North Pacific. But I want you to see the data here, just something to compare against. All right, temperature-wise, this is our frost threat over the next 7 days, mainly in northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then here in the spine of the Rockies, we're going to get those temperatures cold enough for a frost. For the rest of the country, it's overall pretty mild. The cooler anomalies are not that much cooler than average. So this is today's high temperatures compared to average. There's tomorrow on Saturday. That's Sunday into Monday, a big wave of warmth coming through here early Monday. Get out there to Tuesday, a little cool down that's happening in the Central Plains. We then get out to Wednesday, Thursday. Overall, it's a pretty mild pattern for most of the country. And that's because of that trough I showed you in the Gulf of Alaska. I mean, just watch what it's doing. There's your next 5 days. That's day 5 through 10. And this is day 10 through 15. Now, what is happening in the models is that very few of them are taking this and shoving cold air here. So it's washed out in the ensembles. Matt's right to be watching this area carefully. We still have a thought that maybe getting into early October, we could drive some colder air into Canada, into the into the eastern 2/3 of the country. But that thought is fleeting as the models wash everything out. You say, what do you mean when models wash everything out? Well, look, here's the next 8 days, right? And okay, there's the trough we talked about. There's the low that's off the coast of California. And here's the low we just mentioned that's going to be cutting itself off. You go out farther in the European extended, and you just lose features. Now, this is the one I'm keeping an eye on. You see, I think there's going to be a reflection of this here in that first week of October. But the models lose it. See this? There's just no signal here. And that's common. I mean, this is the hardest time frame over which to accurately and skillfully forecast weather. It's called the subseasonal, week 2 to week 8. A very, very challenging time period to try to predict the weather over. But beyond that, we have other signals, like, for example, the La Nina that's going on right now, and the North Pacific heat, which, by the way, over the last week, I was kind of missing these maps yesterday as the CPC went down. But take a look at that. Look how much cooler we've got. Now, it's still hotter than average, but there's been a cool down here, and I expect this is going to continue to cool as that low sets up. And that's going to be mission critical to the longer term forecast, because I've told you that if this stays hot and we're in December, then the West Coast has a dry front half of winter signal and hot, and we're going to get lots of cooler air that moves through here. But that's only if this stays really, really warm. The more of this we see in October and November, boy, that just upsets the entire winter pattern. And many of us just continue to be frustrated with the fact that we're not getting any sort of a signal from the MJO. I mean, it's practically collapsed back into null space, not really opening things up to give us any sort of, I'd love it if the MJO would just pop out and go around, but it's not. It seems to be stuck in this configuration. So with that as the initialization point for some of our new models, I want to take you back to the CPC and show you their 3-month outlook for October, November, December. And they're going pretty hardcore La Nina on this. Wetter here and then drier. You've seen me draw that shape of that line many times. And that just tends to be where the lack of a good subtropical jet for the end of fall and start of winter tends to make the Sun Belt and the Cotton Belt drier and hotter. Now let's go ahead and do some stuff here. Let's click on the words 3-month outlook. You can all do this. Go to cpc.ncep.noaa.gov, click on 3-month outlook. We're going to look at their newest data. And we've already seen October, November, December. Let's go out there and look at this one. Let's go just open that in a new tab. Let's go out to December, January, February, and open that in a new tab, and then January, February, March. I have not looked at these yet, so I'm pretty certain I could tell you what they're going to do. Yeah, that's it. So this is the November, December, January. Better chances here and here. You say, why? They're going after La Nina, so the jet tends to come in and go out. And there's no, La Ninas are famous for not having subtropical jets, so that tends to be drier. And I bet it's really going to amplify when I click on that. Yep, there it is. See that? Sun Belt, Cotton Belt, drier, active, active. And let's get into the heart of winter. That's January, February, March. And in just normal fashion, they're going to go after above average precip in the Mississippi and Ohio basins and bigger snows in the Rockies. That is La Nina to the T. Okay, you've heard me say that 1,000 times. I need a new phrase. That's just what La Ninas do. And we had one last winter, and it didn't do this. Where was all of this? Down here. I mean, we were actually snow drought across this whole area, so we have to be careful. We also got a new update from the IRI multi-model probability forecasting system. This is global. We looked at the U.S. Let's look global now. October, November, December. You can see where it's going drier here. You can see how wet it is in Indonesia and Australia. This is important, though. If spring weather is dry in southern Brazil, Uruguay, parts of Argentina, that's a key thing to watch out for, especially if it lasts into November, December, January, which we see it doing that. What about the heart of their summer? You can see that because of the La Nina, they're calling for the risk of drier here. But the signal begins to get washed out. And what I'm curious about is what's going to happen here. Are we really going to be seeing, chances for normal rainfall throughout the Brazilian growing season going forward? By the way, you can also see, if I just flip this over to just a North American view, that is the forecast for December, January, February. It's quite similar. Active, drier in the southeast. But we always take these with a grain of salt. So since we touched there on South America, I do want to show you that these rains that are forecast from the European model, main front coming through early next week, there it is. So this is not fully monsoonal. There's a front driving its way through here. But these rains are going to be the kind of rains that they're going to need to really get actively planting a crop. And I think this is going to boost some of the late September, early October planting progress, and we'll get some of those reports coming out very soon on how quickly they're getting going. Because of this, the new European extended does look like that through the month of October, which would call for near normal and in some places above normal rains, and no major drought signals coming from this particular model run, which is the European extended. So that is going to have to be watched very carefully because their planting pace is going to be critical to determining the early success of the Brazilian crop. So we'll watch it and we'll think about it this weekend and look for any trends. For many of you, just be prepared for some of the first rain you've seen in some cases, 30 to 60 days. And Merce said, I hope some of those rains kind of fill in around you to break your 170-day stretch of drier weather. All right, that's all I got. We'll talk Monday. Thanks.